Fire did not open like a door. It tore reality apart. The sky cracked as if the night itself had been split by a burning blade, and from that wound poured flame, orange, red, and white-hot, screaming as it forced its way into a world that had never known hell. Trees bent away from the heat, their leaves igniting midair, curling into ash before they could touch the ground. A motorcycle burst through first. Its wheels burned without consuming the earth beneath them, leaving molten scars that cooled into blackened stone. Chains rattled violently along its frame, glowing as if freshly pulled from a furnace. The engine howled like a living thing, furious and alive. Then the rider emerged. Ghost Rider rode out of the burning rift, skeletal hands gripping the handlebars, his skull engulfed in eternal flame. The fire cast twisted shadows across the forest floor, revealing a place far removed from any land Johnny Blaze had ever known. This world felt old. Not ancient in the way hell was ancient, structured, ruled, familiar in its cruelty, but old in a quieter, more disturbing way. The air carried sorrow, soaked into the soil like dried blood that never fully washed away. Johnny felt it immediately, pressing against his chest like an invisible weight. The portal snapped shut behind him with a thunderous scream, leaving only scorched air and silence. Ghost Rider slowed his motorcycle, the flames around his skull flickering, not dimming, but reacting. Hellfire did not behave this way without reason. It recognized something here, something wrong. Johnny dismounted, boots crunching against the burnt leaves. His chain slid off his shoulder, hitting the ground with a metallic echo that traveled too far through the furrow. "All right," he muttered, his voice layered, human and something far darker beneath it. "Where the hell am I now?" No answer came. Only the distant sound of wind, and something else. A scream. It wasn't close, but it was sharp enough to cut through the forest like a blade. Human, terrified, ending too quickly. Ghost Rider's flames surged. In a heartbeat, Johnny was back on the motorcycle. The engine roared as he tore through the trees, branches snapping and igniting as he passed. The forest blurred into streaks of black and red, the smell of burning wood mixing with something far worse. Blood. The village appeared suddenly, tucked into a clearing like prey that had never known it was being hunted. Houses burned in uneven patches, some already collapsed, others still standing but screaming with fire. Villagers ran in every direction, their fear heavy and suffocating. At the center of it all stood the creature. It was humanoid, but wrong. Skin pale and stretched too tight over muscle that moved unnaturally. Eyes glowing with hunger rather than intelligence. Its mouth split into a grin far wider than any human jaw should allow. Teeth stained dark with fresh blood. The demon laughed as it grabbed a man by the head, lifting him effortlessly from the ground. Ghost Rider didn't slow down. The motorcycle launched forward, and chains shot out like living serpents. They wrapped around the demon's arm and neck, yanking it backward with brutal force. The man fell free, collapsing into the dirt, alive. Barely. The demon snarled, claws digging into the ground as it resisted the pull. Its head snapped toward Ghost Rider, eyes widening in confusion rather than fear. "What are you?" it hissed. Ghost Rider stepped off the bike, flames roaring higher as he approached. Each footstep left scorched earth behind. "I'm the reason monsters like you don't sleep easy," Johnny said. "And you've got a lot to answer for." Hellfire erupted. The demon screamed as flames engulfed its body, its flesh charring and splitting open. The smell was foul, corrupted, not the clean burn of a soul damned to hell. This was different, resistant. The demon didn't disintegrate. It regenerated. Burnt flesh peeled away and reformed, muscle knitting itself back together with horrifying speed. The demon laughed again, even as fire clung to its skin. "You burn," it said, voice shaking with excitement, "but you cannot kill me." For the first time since arriving, Ghost Rider hesitated. That hesitation almost cost him. A blur of motion sliced through the smoke. Steel flashed. The demon's laughter cut off mid-breath as its head separated cleanly from its body, landing in the dirt with a wet thud. The flames died down. A figure landed lightly beside the fallen corpse, a young man with kind eyes and a bloodied blade. He steadied his breathing, posture disciplined, calm even after the kill. Tanjiro Kamado looked at Ghost Rider, not with fear, with understanding. "I don't know what you are," Tanjiro said carefully, gripping his sword. "But I can tell. You're carrying a lot of pain." Ghost Rider's flames flickered, not in anger, in recognition. The demon's body collapsed seconds after its head hit the ground, dissolving into ash that scattered across the dirt like burnt snow. The fire consuming it faded quickly, leaving behind nothing but silence and the crackle of dying flames from the village homes. Tanjiro remained still, sword raised, eyes locked on the flaming skull before him. He had faced demons stronger than this, faster, crueler, but never something like him. The scent in the air overwhelmed Tanjiro's senses. Smoke, blood, fear, and something else layered beneath it all. A presence that burned without heat, heavy with sorrow and judgment. It pressed against Tanjiro's chest, making his breath hitch. "You're not a demon," Tanjiro said again, more certain now. Demons smelled empty, like something missing. Ghost Rider tilted his skull slightly, as if studying the boy. The flames around his head slowed, rolling instead of raging. "And you're not prey," Johnny replied. "You fight them. You protect people." Tanjiro lowered his sword a fraction, but not fully. Trust was earned, not given. "Those things you fought," he said, glancing at the ash on the ground. "They're called demons. They can only be killed by sunlight or blades made from Nichiren steel." Ghost Rider looked down at the ashes, then back at Tanjiro. "Good to know," he muttered, because fire alone didn't finish the job. Around them, villagers began to peek out from hiding. Some cried in relief. Others stared at Ghost Rider in open terror. Children clung to their parents, whispering through trembling lips. "A flaming skull," someone murmured. "Is it another demon?" The words hit Johnny harder than any blade could have. He turned slowly toward the villagers. Instinct told him to step back, to let the flames dim, to make himself less threatening. But the spirit of vengeance did not hide. It never had. "I'm not here for you," Ghost Rider said, his voice echoing unnaturally through the clearing. "I hunt the guilty." That did nothing to calm them. A woman fell to her knees, clutching her child. "Please, please don't punish us," she sobbed. "We've lost everything already." Tanjiro stepped forward immediately, placing himself between Ghost Rider and the villagers, not in defiance, but in protection. "He saved you," Tanjiro said firmly. "If he meant you harm, you'd already be dead." Ghost Rider looked down at Tanjiro. Flames flaring briefly at the boy's courage. Chains rattled as Johnny shifted his weight. "You stand between monsters and people a lot, don't you?" Johnny said. Tanjiro nodded. It's my duty. Something stirred within the hellfire. Johnny Blaze had stood like that once. Before deals, before damnation, before hell. A distant sound rolled through the forest, a low, unnatural thrum that made Tanjiro tense instantly. His grip tightened on the sword. More demons, Tanjiro said, under his breath. They're coming. Ghost Rider closed his fist, chains tightening around his arm. Then they're late. The first demon burst from the tree line, its body twisted and elongated, eyes burning with hunger. 2 more followed, then 3, drawn by blood, fire, and chaos. Tanjiro moved instantly, stepping into his stance. Stay back, he shouted to the villagers. Run to the east. The demons charged. Ghost Rider didn't wait. He launched forward, chains exploding outward, wrapping around one demon's torso and slamming it into the ground with bone-crushing force. Another leapt for his head, too fast, too reckless. Hellfire surged. The demon screamed as flames consumed it, thrashing violently, but again, it did not die. Its flesh burned and healed in a maddening cycle. Persistent, Johnny growled. Tanjiro sliced through the demon's neck in a clean arc, his blade glowing faintly red as it cut. The head flew, body collapsing moments later. They fought side by side without speaking. 2 warriors from different worlds moving on instinct alone. Hellfire and water breathing clashed and blended, fire illuminating steel, steel guiding flame. But Ghost Rider noticed something disturbing. Each demon reacted differently to the hellfire. Some screamed in agony, others endured it with terrifying resilience. Their sins were there, Johnny could feel them, but they were muffled, buried beneath layers of something unnatural. These demons, Johnny said mid-fight, slamming another creature into the ground. They're bound to something. Tanjiro cut down the last attacker, breathing hard. Yes, he said, to the first demon, Muzan Kibutsuji. The name echoed strangely. The hellfire around Ghost Rider flared violently, reacting as if struck. Muzan, Johnny repeated slowly. He's the source. Tanjiro nodded. All demons come from him, and as long as he exists, this won't end. Ghost Rider stared into the dark forest beyond the village, flames burning brighter with each passing second. Then I didn't end up here by accident, he said. Somewhere far away, beyond forests and mountains, something ancient smiled. The village did not celebrate its survival. Even after the demons were reduced to ash, fear lingered like smoke that refused to clear. Fires were put out hastily, bodies were gathered, and prayers were whispered, not of victory, but of uncertainty. Ghost Rider stood apart from it all, his flames casting long shadows against the broken houses. Villagers avoided his gaze, speaking in hushed tones whenever his chains rattled or the fire crackled too loudly. Tanjiro noticed. He approached Johnny cautiously, sword now sheathed, hands visible. They're grateful, Tanjiro said gently. They're just scared. Ghost Rider watched a child peek out from behind a broken cart, eyes wide at the sight of the burning skull. The child quickly hid again. Story of my life, Johnny replied. People don't cheer for judgment. Tanjiro shook his head. They will. In time. Johnny let out a dry, humorless laugh. You've got more faith than most. Before Tanjiro could respond, a sharp pressure rolled through the air, like the world itself tightening its grip. The flames around Ghost Rider's skull flickered violently, flaring and then pulling inward as if resisting something unseen. Johnny stiffened. What is it? Tanjiro asked immediately. This world, Johnny said slowly. It doesn't like me. As if in response, the ground beneath Johnny's boots cracked faintly, thin lines spreading outward before stopping. The fire on his skull stabilized, but it burned differently now, less wild, more constrained. Tanjiro felt it too. His ears rang, just briefly, like the aftermath of a thunderclap. Demons usually make the air feel heavy, he said. But this feels like something watching. Johnny turned toward the forest again, eyes burning brighter. Yeah, he said, I feel it. For a moment, something else stirred within him. A presence older than the spirit of vengeance, colder, calculating. The hellfire reacted instinctively, flaring in defiance, but Johnny forced it down. Whoever or whatever was observing him was not attacking.
Not yet. We should leave, Tanjiro said after a moment. The Demon Slayer Corps will want to know about it. And if Muzan senses you... Johnny finished the thought for him. He'll come sniffing. Tanjiro nodded grimly.
Or send something worse. The journey began at first light. Tanjiro guided Ghost Rider through forest paths, hidden from ordinary travelers. Johnny walked beside his motorcycle rather than riding it. The engine's roar drew too much attention, and even he could sense how violently this world reacted to its presence. As they traveled, Tanjiro spoke. He explained the Demon Slayer Corps, the Hashira, the endless war fought in shadows. He spoke of families destroyed, of demons who had once been human, of Muzan's cruelty stretching back centuries. Johnny listened in silence. Every story felt familiar. Different world. Same suffering. You ever think about stopping? Tanjiro asked quietly after a long stretch of silence. Johnny's flames pulsed once. Every damn day. Tanjiro studied him carefully. Then why don't you? Johnny stopped walking. He looked down at his hands, skeletal, burning, cursed. Chains hung heavy at his sides. Because if I stop, Johnny said, voice low, people like the ones back there die, and monsters like Muzan keep breathing. Tanjiro nodded slowly. Then, we're not so different. That was when it happened. The forest went silent. No birds, no wind. Even Tanjiro's breathing seemed too loud. Johnny felt it first, the pull, a sharp, unnatural tug at the center of his being, like a hook digging into his soul. The spirit of vengeance roared. Johnny dropped to one knee, flames exploding outward as chains lashed uncontrollably into the trees, embedding deep into wood and stone. Tanjiro spun, blade half drawn. Johnny! Johnny clenched his fists, teeth grinding. He found me. Far away, in a place hidden beyond reach and reason, Muzan Kibutsuji stood in the darkness of his lair. His eyes opened slowly, pupils narrowing. So, Muzan murmured, smiling faintly, hell has sent a judge. The pull intensified. Visions flashed through Johnny's mind, faces twisted in cruelty, laughter soaked in blood, centuries of sin layered one atop another, but beneath it all was something new. A soul, fragmented, shielded. Muzan was not one sinner. He was thousands. Johnny screamed, not in pain, but in fury, as he tore himself free of the pull. The flames surged violently, burning brighter than before, pushing back against the unseen gaze. The forest trembled. Tanjiro staggered, nearly losing his footing. What was that? Johnny rose, slowly, flames stabilizing once more, but something had changed. The fire was sharper now, focused. He's watching, Johnny said. And he's curious. Tanjiro swallowed. That's not good. No, Johnny agreed. It's worse. He turned toward the horizon, eyes blazing through the night. Because now he knows I can hurt him. And somewhere deep within the demon world, Muzan's smile widened. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, night had deepened into something heavy and watchful. Clouds swallowed the moon, and the road ahead twisted through narrow mountain paths carved by centuries of quiet travel and bloodshed. Tanjiro slowed, sensing the shift. "We're close," he said. "This is where the Demon Slayer Corps patrols regularly." Ghost Rider felt it too. Not demons, people. Disciplined footsteps, controlled breathing, warriors hiding in plain sight. "Show yourselves," Johnny said, voice carrying effortlessly through the trees. Steel answered. Figures emerged from the shadows in practiced silence, blades drawn, uniforms marked with the insignia of the Corps. Their eyes locked onto Ghost Rider instantly, fear flashing across even the most hardened faces. One of them stepped forward, stance tense. "Kamado Tanjiro," he said sharply. "Explain. Now." Tanjiro bowed his head respectfully, but stood his ground. "He saved a village," Tanjiro said. "He isn't a demon." A murmur rippled through the group. "He's burning," another slayer hissed. "And he reeks of death." Johnny didn't argue. He stepped forward instead, sullen. The ground beneath his feet blackened as he moved. Flames rose higher around his skull, illuminating every blade pointed in his direction. "If I wanted you dead," Ghost Rider said calmly, "this mountain would already be ash." Several slayers flinched, but none attacked, because they felt it. This presence wasn't predatory. It was judgmental. A sudden rush of air cut between them. He landed gracefully atop a rock, arms folded, eyes sharp and unblinking. "Giyu Tomioka. Water. Hashira." His blade remained sheathed, but his attention never left Ghost Rider. "You're not lying," Giyu said after a long pause, "but you're not safe either." Ghost Rider met his gaze without hesitation, never claimed to be. Another presence joined them, lighter, almost playful, yet carrying an edge sharp enough to draw blood. Shinobu Kocho smiled faintly as she stepped into the clearing. "Fascinating," she said softly. "You burn like a curse, but you smell like punishment." Her eyes flicked to Tanjiro. Did he harm any humans? "No," Tanjiro answered instantly. Shinobu's smile widened just a little. "Then he lives." Johnny raised a brow ridge. What would have been an eyebrow once. "That simple, huh?" "For now," Shinobu replied. The air shifted again. A deep, warm presence swept over the clearing, like sunrise breaking through smoke. Rengoku Kyojuro arrived in a burst of motion and laughter, eyes blazing with excitement. "Incredible," he boomed, staring openly at Ghost Rider. "Your spirit burns with righteous fury, a flame born not of hatred, but of resolve." Johnny blinked. "I like this one." Rengoku laughed loudly. "Ha ha! Excellent!" The moment broke the tension, slightly, but not completely. Giyu stepped closer, voice low. "You said demons come from one source," he said to Johnny. "You felt him." Johnny nodded. "Muzan." The name rippled through the Hashira like ice water. Shinobu's smile vanished. Rengoku's expression hardened. Even Giyu's calm fractured for a brief moment. Johnny continued. "He's not just a demon. He's a mass grave wearing skin, and he knows I'm here." Silence followed. Then the world itself responded. A shockwave rolled through the mountains, not physical, but spiritual. Flames around Ghost Rider surged uncontrollably. Several slayers staggered, forced to their knees by the pressure. Tanjiro gasped, clutching his chest. This feeling. Johnny clenched his fists, chains rattling violently. He's testing the boundary. Far away, Muzan pushed, not with strength, but with influence. The ground cracked beneath the clearing. Torches extinguished, Nicarin blades vibrated in their sheaths as if resisting something unseen. Ghost Rider stepped forward, placing himself between the slayers and the pressure. Hellfire exploded outward, not wild, but controlled. A barrier of flame and judgment that pushed back against Muzan's probing will. The pressure snapped. The night went still. Slowly, the flames around Johnny settled, burning steady once more. Rengoku stared in awe. He protected us. Giyu exhaled sharply. A demon would never do that. Shinobu watched Johnny with new interest. "You're not here to conquer," she said. "You're here to hunt." Johnny turned toward the distant horizon, flames reflecting off his skull like burning stars. "I don't care about your world's rules," he said, "but I care about your dead." He looked back at them. "And as long as Muzan exists, neither of our wars ends." For the first time in centuries, the Demon Slayer Corps stood face to face with something beyond their doctrine. Not a demon, not a human, but a force of judgment that hell itself had unleashed. And in the shadows between worlds, Muzan Kibutsuji understood something chilling. This fire would not be extinguished easily. Morning did not bring peace. Dawn crept over the mountains in pale, hesitant light, revealing the damage left behind by forces that did not belong to this world. Burn marks scarred the earth in perfect circles. Trees stood untouched beside others reduced to charcoal. The air itself felt unsettled, as if the land was still deciding whether to accept what had passed through it or reject it violently. Ghost Rider stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the sun rise. The flames around his skull dimmed, not extinguished, never extinguished, but subdued. Daylight weakened demons. It did not weaken him. Still, the hellfire reacted, pulling inward like a predator forced to rest. Behind him, the Demon Slayer Corps moved carefully. No one approached without purpose. No one turned their back on him. Johnny Blaze felt it. The scrutiny, the calculations. He'd been judged before by angels, demons, and everything in between. Mortal warriors sizing him up was almost refreshing. Almost. Shinobu Kocho circled him slowly, her steps light, eyes sharp with curiosity rather than fear. "Your flames," she said softly. "They respond to guilt, to memory." Johnny didn't turn. "They respond to sin." "Not the same thing," Shinobu replied. "Guilt can exist without wrongdoing, and wrongdoing without guilt." Johnny's fire flickered. She noticed. Rengoku approached next, hands resting proudly at his sides. "Your resolve is magnificent," he declared. "But tell me, do you fight because you hate demons, or because you love humans?" Johnny turned toward him fully this time. The question hit deeper than Rengoku realized. "I fight," Johnny said slowly, "because someone has to make monsters answer for what they've done." Rengoku nodded, satisfied. "Justice!" he shouted. "A noble flame!" Giyu watched silently from a distance, arms crossed, eyes never leaving Johnny. He wasn't measuring power. He was measuring control. Tanjiro stood between worlds again, close enough to Ghost Rider to feel the heat, yet calm enough not to flinch. "The Corps wants to understand you," Tanjiro said, "and they want you to understand us." Johnny snorted quietly. "That usually ends with someone trying to kill me." Tanjiro smiled faintly. "We'll try to avoid that." They traveled deeper into the mountains, toward a hidden training ground where the Corps could observe Ghost Rider without risking civilians. The path was steep and narrow, forcing everyone to slow. Johnny noticed something immediately. The mountains resisted him. Not aggressively, subtly. His chains felt heavier. His steps sank deeper into the earth. Even the hellfire burned tighter, restrained by something unseen. "This world fights back," Johnny said. Giyu finally spoke. "It has rules." Johnny glanced at him. So did hell. That earned a reaction. At the training grounds, the Corps formed a loose circle around Ghost Rider, blades sheathed but ready. Shinobu produced small tools, powders, and vials, careful not to step too close. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the flames. Johnny considered her for a moment, then extended his hand. Hellfire curled around her instruments, but did not burn them. Shinobu's eyes widened slightly. "It's selective," she murmured. "It chooses." Johnny nodded. "Always has." She looked up at him. "Then it's not mindless. It's principled." Across the clearing, several slayers whispered nervously. "He could burn us all." "Why hasn't he?" "Because we haven't earned it." The words spread uneasily. Rengoku stepped forward. "Let us test something," he said, drawing his blade partially. "Not against us, but against a demon." The answer came sooner than expected. A presence slithered into the clearing, masked by the mountain shadows, a demon, clever, patient, drawn by the lingering hellfire, like a moth to a funeral pyre. The demon laughed softly. "Such delicious chaos," it purred. "A new predator enters the hunt." Before anyone could move, Ghost Rider stepped forward. Chains uncoiled. The demon froze, not from fear, but from recognition. "You," it whispered, "you are not bound by Muzan." Johnny's flames surged. "No," he said, "I'm bound by consequence." The penance. Stare ignited. The demon screamed as centuries of murder, betrayal, and cruelty flooded back into its mind. It collapsed to its knees, clawing at its face, begging for release that would never come. The slayers watched in horror and awe as the demon burned, not physically, but spiritually. When it finally disintegrated, nothing remained. Not even ash. Silence swallowed the clearing. Shinobu broke it first. "That was not execution," she said quietly. "That was judgment." Johnny turned to face them all. "Your swords end demons," he said. "I end the reason they think they deserve to exist." No one argued. Because in that moment, the Demon Slayer Corps realized something terrifying. They had spent centuries learning how to kill demons, but they had never learned how to judge them. The silence that followed the demon's destruction was heavier than any scream. The clearing felt altered, as if something fundamental had been stripped away. The air no longer carried a demon stench, no blood, no decay, but it also lacked the familiar residue the slayers were used to after a kill. No ash, no remains, nothing to burn at sunrise. Just absence. Several slayers shifted uneasily. "This isn't how it usually ends," one of them murmured. Shinobu knelt where the demon had fallen, studying the ground. Not a mark remained, no trace of flesh, no poison-resistant residue, not even spiritual residue detectable by her instruments. "It's as if the demon was undone," she said softly. Johnny Blaze stood a few steps away, chains resting heavily against his sides. The flames around his skull burned low, steady, controlled. "That demon didn't just die," he said. "It paid." Giyu approached him, eyes narrowed, not in anger, but concern. "You made it relive every life it destroyed." Johnny met his gaze. "That's what judgment is." And if a demon was forced into this state, Giyu pressed. If it was created without choice? The question landed hard. Tanjiro inhaled sharply. Some demons don't remember their human lives, he said. Some were turned unwillingly. Some regret what they've done. The hellfire flickered. Johnny turned away, staring into the tree line. Regret doesn't erase blood. No, Tanjiro agreed quietly. But understanding it might prevent more. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the ground trembled faintly. Not an earthquake, something deeper. A vibration that rippled through the mountains and into the bones of every living thing. Ghost Rider felt it immediately. He staggered, one knee hitting the ground as chains slammed outward instinctively, embedding into stone to steady himself. Flames flared wildly before he forced them down. Johnny! Tanjiro rushed forward. Johnny raised a hand, stopping him. I'm fine, he growled, then paused. No, I'm not. Shinobu felt it now, too, pressing against her chest like an invisible hand. That wasn't Muzan, she said. It felt reactive. This world is correcting itself, Johnny said slowly. I don't belong here, and it's making that clear. Giyu's eyes hardened. Then why hasn't it expelled you? Johnny laughed, dry, humorless. Because something worse belongs here. Muzan adapted quickly. That night, reports flooded in from surrounding regions. Demons behaving strangely, avoiding confrontation, retreating from hellfire-scorched paths. Some even fled from ordinary villages they would have previously attacked without hesitation. Others changed. A slayer arrived bloodied and shaken, kneeling before the Hashira. We encountered a demon that felt nothing, he said. No fear, no guilt. It laughed when confronted. Johnny's flames spiked violently. That's new, he said. Shinobu's expression darkened. If Muzan can suppress guilt, if he can fracture or bury it, your judgment becomes less effective. Johnny clenched his fists. He's armoring them against consequence. Tanjiro swallowed. He's learning from you. The realization settled like a curse. By dawn, Ghost Rider had killed 3 more demons. Each time, the penance stare worked less cleanly. Some demons screamed and collapsed. Others resisted, their souls splintered, protected by layers of artificial numbness. Each time, Johnny felt it cost him something. His flames burned hotter but shorter. His chains struck harder but slower. This world taxed him. Later, alone at the edge of the mountains, Johnny stared at his reflection in a pool of water. The skull stared back, flames wavering. I've broken worlds before, he muttered. This one doesn't break easy. Tanjiro approached quietly. You're hurting, he said. Johnny scoffed. Been hurting a long time. Tanjiro shook his head. This is different. You're carrying the weight of 2 wars now. Johnny closed his eyes. He remembered the village, the child hiding, the woman begging him not to judge them. This world didn't need a god of punishment. It needed balance. I can't stay forever, Johnny said finally. If I do, I'll either burn this place to the ground, or it'll burn me out. Tanjiro looked up at him. Then we'll fight smarter. Together. A sharp cry echoed through the valley. A slayer's warning call. Giyu appeared instantly. Muzan has made his move, he said. A demon, one of the 12 Kizuki, has revealed itself. Johnny's flames surged, brighter than they had all day. Good, he said. Let's see how deep his armor really goes. Far away, Muzan watched the world shift beneath his feet. The rider had not broken his domain, but he had forced Muzan to evolve. and that made the game far more dangerous. The sky darkened unnaturally as they reached the battlefield. Clouds twisted in slow, deliberate spirals overhead, blotting out the sun despite the early hour. The air was thick with blood and something sharper: anticipation. Whatever waited ahead was not hiding. It wanted to be seen. Bodies lay scattered across the hillside. Not villagers. Slayers. Some were still breathing. Others stared blankly at the sky, eyes wide, expressions frozen in terror rather than pain. Tanjiro's heart pounded. This isn't normal, he whispered. Johnny Blaze felt it too. The presence ahead was vast, layered with cruelty, pride, and something worse than guilt: acceptance. A figure stood calmly at the center of the carnage, hands clasped behind its back, pale skin, elegant posture, crimson markings etched into flesh like ceremonial ink. Upper rank. The demons smiled as they approached. "So, this is the fire," the demon said softly. "I am Upper Moon 3, and you are fascinating." Ghost Rider's chains rattled. "Step away from the bodies," Johnny said, voice echoing with supernatural authority. Upper Moon 3 tilted its head. "Why?" it asked genuinely. They fought bravely. Their despair was exquisite. The hellfire erupted. Johnny lunged, chains snapping forward with explosive force, wrapping around the demon's torso and slamming it into the ground hard enough to shatter rock. Flames engulfed the impact site instantly. The Slayers braced themselves. This was it. But when the smoke cleared, Upper Moon 3 stood, unburned. The flames clung briefly to its skin before extinguishing themselves, as if rejected. The demon glanced down at its chest, mildly curious. "Oh," it said, "that should have hurt." Johnny froze. That had never happened before. The demon moved faster than sound. One moment it stood several meters away. The next, it was directly in front of Ghost Rider, fist buried in Johnny's chest. The impact launched Johnny through 3 boulders, his body carving a smoking trench through the mountainside before crashing to a halt. "Johnny!" Tanjiro shouted. The Upper Moon flexed its fingers, studying them. "Interesting," it murmured. "Your fire responds to guilt, but I have long since outgrown such things." Johnny rose, slowly, from the rubble, flames flickering violently. "No one outgrows consequence," he growled. He locked eyes with the demon. The penance. Stare ignited. Hellfire flared inward, collapsing into a focused inferno behind Johnny's eyes. The world seemed to darken as judgment descended. The demon screamed. For a moment, images flooded the demon's mind, centuries of slaughter, broken lives, echoes of screams layered atop one another. The demon staggered, clutching its head, then laughed. The laughter was raw, broken. "Yes," the demon said breathlessly. "I remember all of it." Johnny's fire faltered. "You feel it," the demon continued. "Every death, every scream. And yet, I feel nothing." The penance. Stare broke. Johnny stumbled backward, flames dimming sharply. Tanjiro felt his blood run cold. It resisted. Shinobu whispered, horrified. It accepted its sins. Upper Moon 3 straightened, eyes gleaming. "Your judgment feeds on remorse," it said. "But Muzan taught us something beautiful." It stepped forward. "Remorse is optional." The demon struck again, faster, heavier. Ghost Rider blocked with his chains, but the impact still sent shockwaves through his body. Hellfire flared defensively, burning brighter just to hold form. Rengoku leapt into action, blade blazing, flame breathing. The Upper Moon backhanded him aside effortlessly, sending him skidding across the ground. The battlefield descended into chaos. Slayers attacked in coordinated strikes, blades flashing, breathing techniques roaring, but none could land a decisive blow. The demon danced through them, untouchable, laughing all the while. Johnny forced himself upright. This wasn't just resistance. This was adaptation. This world is teaching them how to survive me, Johnny realized. Tanjiro ran to his side. "We don't need to destroy it alone," he said desperately. "We fight together." Johnny looked at the boy, at his resolve, his compassion, his humanity. The hellfire shifted. Johnny hurled his chains, not at the demon, but around Tanjiro's blade. Flames surged along the Nichiren steel, coating it without melting it. Rengoku saw it instantly. "Yes!" he roared. "Burn together!" The upper moon's smile faltered. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across its face. Tanjiro charged, blade blazing with a fusion of sun-breathing and hellfire, slicing through the demon's defenses with terrifying force. The demon reeled, but did not fall. It leapt back, wounded but smiling. "Ah," it said softly. "Now that hurts." The clouds overhead parted slightly. The sun threatened to break through. The demon retreated into the shadows, body knitting itself back together as it vanished. "This isn't over, Rider," its voice echoed. "Muzan will want to study you." Silence returned to the battlefield. Johnny collapsed to one knee, flames guttering dangerously low. He had faced something he could not simply judge, and lived. Barely. The battlefield fell silent again, but the quiet was no longer peaceful. It hung heavy, thick with tension and the smell of scorched earth. Slayers huddled, some leaning on their blades, some staring at the horizon where the upper moon had disappeared. Johnny Blaze remained kneeling, flames low, skull dim, chains clinking weakly against the rocks. Tanjiro approached cautiously, his breath shallow. "Are you all right?" Johnny lifted his head slowly. "I'm fine," he said, though the words sounded hollow. "But that wasn't a fight, that was a lesson." Shinobu stepped forward, her face pale but calm. "A lesson?" she repeated softly. "For whom?" Johnny didn't answer immediately. He let the wind whip through the mountains, carrying with it a cold chill, the kind of chill that made even hellfire hesitate. "For both of us," he said finally. "For me, and for this world." The Hashira exchanged glances. Rengoku stepped closer, still breathing heavily from the confrontation. "You are telling us that even your judgment has limits?" Johnny's skull tilted slightly. "Limits? Maybe. Or maybe some sins are too sharp to touch. Some..." Tanjiro's grip tightened on his sword. "So, what do we do? We can't just let them adapt. If Muzan knows how to resist you, then all the corpses, all the villages, they're still at risk." Gyu's gaze remained steady on Ghost Rider. "He's telling the truth. The world here isn't like hell or earth. Demons adapt quickly, and if you don't adjust, you burn yourself out before you even win." Johnny clenched his fists, chains rattling softly. "I've spent centuries hunting monsters. I've learned a lot, but this is new, different, and I'm not sure even I know how to deal with it yet." The tension among the Corps was palpable. Even Shinobu, usually composed, stepped closer, studying him as if weighing his soul. "You came here to punish demons," she said quietly. "But this world isn't about punishment alone. It's about protection, guidance, balance. If you continue as you are, you risk destroying the very world you claim to protect." Johnny's flames flickered, reflecting the weight of her words. For centuries, he had been a force of vengeance. Judgment was his language. Punishment was his tool. Compassion had always been optional. And yet, standing here with Tanjiro and the Core, he felt something unfamiliar. A subtle gnawing awareness that he might not be enough. Goku clapped a hand on his shoulder. Then we fight together. Your fire, our blades. Your judgment, our techniques. If Muzan learns to resist, we adapt. That is what we do. Johnny looked at Rengoku, then at Tanjiro. Flames around his skull surged faintly higher, not in anger, but in resolve. Together, he said. The morning passed slowly as the Core assessed the battlefield and tended to their wounded. Johnny remained at the edge of the clearing, chains coiled, flames low but constant. He observed every motion, every subtle shift in the wind, every sound in the forest. He knew the upper moon would not have disappeared completely. It would be plotting, learning, adapting. Muzan would ensure that. And when it returned, the fire alone might not be enough. Tanjiro approached him again. "Johnny, why stay?" he asked gently. "You could leave through the portal. You've already saved lives here. This world doesn't need you to fight their battles forever." Johnny's flames flickered, reflecting the internal conflict that rarely surfaced. "Because I can't leave," he admitted. "Not yet. These demons, Muzan, they're like nothing I've faced before. And if I walk away now, they'll keep feeding on humans. And I'll know it. That's what my curse does. It doesn't let me run." Tanjiro nodded slowly. "Then we'll face it together. And maybe there's something we can teach each other." Johnny blinked, half amused, half surprised. "Teach each other, huh? Never thought I'd hear that in my life." Giyu, watching from the shadows, finally spoke. "This isn't just about fighting," he said. "It's about understanding the enemy. And if Muzan can adapt, then we must adapt too. Your fire. It's more than a weapon. It's a signal. It's a warning. And it could be our advantage, if we learn to use it properly." Shinobu added softly. "But it is dangerous. You are a force this world is not equipped to contain. Even the strongest Hashira cannot restrain you fully, and if the wrong person perceives you, if fear outweighs trust, then conflict is inevitable." Johnny's skull burned a little brighter at that. "I know. That's why I'm careful. That's why I stay on the edge. That's why I fight when it's necessary. Not to dominate, not to punish indiscriminately, but to make sure someone survives." Rengoku's eyes blazed, full of unshakable resolve. "Then we fight, and we protect. Your fire, our blades, our hearts united against Muzan. That is how we survive." The discussion ended there, but the implications lingered. By afternoon, the Core had gathered intelligence on the upper moon's movements. Reports confirmed the demon had retreated to regroup. Its resilience now a direct response to Ghost Rider's presence. Muzan was testing the limits of the spirit of vengeance, probing to see if the rider could truly challenge his domain. The battle lines were forming. Johnny walked to the edge of the mountains, chains trailing behind him, flames flickering thoughtfully. He felt it, the pulse of this world, strange and alive, tugging at his fire. Unlike hell, unlike earth, this world pushed back, resisted. The mountains whispered in a way he had never heard before. Not fear, not pain, not despair, but expectation, challenge, judgment beyond sin. Johnny understood now. He wasn't just here to fight demons. He was here to learn, to understand a world that operated under rules his fire had never known, and to test the limits of judgment against an enemy that could adapt, resist, and survive. And Muzan. Muzan would be watching, calculating, preparing. Johnny tightened his fists. Flames flared bright, illuminating the mountainside like a warning flare. Chains rattled. The spirit of vengeance stirred fully awake. This isn't just a fight, he muttered to himself. It's a reckoning. Tanjiro appeared beside him, eyes steady. Then let's face it, the boy said quietly. Together. Johnny looked at him, flames burning hotter for a moment, not in anger, but in determination. Together, he repeated. From the shadows of the mountains, unseen, something cold and ancient stirred. A presence aware, waiting, calculating. Muzan Kibutsuji had recognized a force that could not be ignored. And now, the true test for both worlds had begun. The shadows were alive. Not the usual darkness of a forest at night, nor the shifting gloom of a city abandoned at twilight. These shadows breathed, stretched, and quivered with purpose. From the heart of Muzan Kibutsuji's hidden domain, they flowed outward like ink spilled on the surface of reality itself. They were unseen yet felt, touching every corner of the world Johnny Blaze had entered, probing and calculating, waiting. Muzan sat in his throne of blackened stone, an unnatural stillness surrounding him, the dim light of crimson lamps reflecting off his pale, flawless skin. His eyes, red, piercing, and unblinking, were fixed on a place far away, far beyond ordinary perception. Johnny Blaze. The rider had burned demons that should have been untouchable. Upper moons had cowered, faltered, and vanished before the penitent stare, yet Muzan had sensed it all. The fire, the chains, the very aura of judgment. It was not merely dangerous, it was an anomaly, a puzzle, a threat. A slow smile curved Muzan's lips. Interesting, he murmured. Johnny Blaze, he whispered to the shadows. So you've crossed into my world, so the flames of hell itself dare to interfere. He leaned forward, fingers laced. And yet, you are only beginning to understand what it means to face me. Far away, in the mountains of the Demon Slayer world, Ghost Rider rode through the night. The sun had set, leaving trails of smoke and burned paths behind him. Tanjiro followed cautiously on foot, the boy's senses acutely aware of every shift in the wind, every whisper in the trees. Johnny felt it immediately, something cold, intelligent, and malevolent brushing against the edges of his mind. It wasn't just a demon, or even an upper moon. This presence stretched beyond comprehension. It tugged at him, pried at memories buried beneath the layers of pain, regret, and anger. He clenched his jaw. Chains rattled as flames flared around his skull, brighter and hotter than they had been all day. So, you're here, he muttered. I've been waiting for you. Tanjiro glanced at him, alarmed. Waiting? For who? Johnny's voice was low, guttural, uncomfortably calm. Not who. What? Muzan Kibutsuji. The boy froze. Muzan. The name carried weight that even Ghost Rider felt, stretching across the veil between realms, chilling every muscle, every instinct. He knows we're here? Tanjiro whispered. Johnny nodded. And he's already learning from me. The forest shifted as they traveled. Trees groaned under the unnatural presence. Small animals fled instinctively. Even demons in hiding paused to watch, sensing a predator unlike any they had encountered. Johnny's mind drifted briefly to another time. Another world. A life before the rider. Flames did not come at birth. Chains did not rattle in infancy. Vengeance was not innate. It was carved, forged, demanded, and imposed. Johnny remembered the night he first became the spirit of vengeance, the accident that stole his soul and tethered it to hell. The deal, the curse, the endless road of judgment. It had begun with fire. The kind of fire that devours indiscriminately, that leaves nothing but ash. A fire that burns everything the guilty love, everything the innocent cling to, everything that exists between sin and repentance. He had sworn vengeance then, for himself, for others, for the world that had wronged him, for those who could not fight, for those who could not see justice served. And yet, Muzan was different. Muzan did not care for justice. Muzan did not fear punishment. Muzan's cruelty was not rooted in sin or morality. It was rooted in evolution, survival, dominion, a predator that could never be judged. Johnny exhaled through the fire that burned his skull. He's the kind of monster that doesn't learn. Or maybe he already knows everything, he muttered. Either way, he's dangerous. Tanjiro slowed, keeping pace beside him, sword ready. If Muzan knows of you, that means every move he makes will be calculated to counter you. Johnny nodded. Exactly. The thought did not discourage him. It never did. Every life Johnny had touched, every demon he had judged, every wrong he had corrected, it had taught him one thing: that preparation, speed, and ferocity were useless without understanding. And Muzan was a riddle, a storm, a test. The memory returned sharply. A night in a city long burned in memory, when a deal with Mephisto, long forgotten by the mortal world, had bound him to hellfire. His hands, once human, had become chains. His skull, once flesh, had become fire. Justice was no longer a choice. Vengeance was no longer personal. It was law. And every time he wielded it, a piece of him shattered, rebuilt, and burned again. He was a weapon, not just for punishment, not just for sin. He was a signal, a warning, a reckoning. And now, in this world, Johnny realized, he was more than that. He was a catalyst. Muzan, from his hidden lair, began sending tendrils of influence across the mountains, across forests, through rivers and valleys. Upper moons began to stir, responding to something they could not see fully, reacting instinctively to the presence of hellfire in their midst. Even demons who had been loyal to Muzan for centuries shivered at the whispers in their minds. It was subtle at first, commands buried deep in dreams, shadows moving unnaturally across walls, but the effect was immediate. Demons became reckless. Patterns they had followed for decades began to unravel. Fear entered their calculations, and the upper moons themselves hesitated, for the first time in centuries, at the idea of facing the rider. Johnny sensed it. He felt the tremor of the world shifting beneath Muzan's manipulations. He had faced powerful demons before, entities that had destroyed cities, slaughtered entire communities. But this was different. Muzan's intellect, patience, and adaptability were a predator in its own right, and now it had focused fully on him. He exhaled, and a fire around his skull flared once more. Chains rattled, responding to instinct. "I've fought monsters, and I've fought gods," Johnny muttered. "But this is new." Tanjiro stayed close, unwavering. "Then we'll face it together," he said softly, as if reaffirming a promise to both worlds. Johnny's flames pulsed slightly at the words. The boy had courage. Too much, maybe. But the world needed courage, and Muzan would learn soon enough that fire could not be ignored, even if it could be resisted. Night had settled over the Demon Slayer Mountains, heavy and suffocating. The wind carried whispers, not of the living, but of something ancient and calculating. Ghost Rider rode silently, chains coiling and uncoiling around him, as if testing the limits of the world's resistance. Tanjiro struggled to keep pace, breath coming in steady, controlled gasps, sword ready, eyes darting. "Johnny, I can feel it," he said quietly. "Something is moving against us, something more powerful than the upper moons." Johnny's skull flared, briefly illuminating the forest around them. "That's Muzan," he said, voice low. "He doesn't just send demons, he probes. Every step we take, every life we touch, he feels it. He adapts. He watches." Tanjiro shivered. "He's learning from you?" Johnny nodded, flames flickering in rhythm with his pulse. "He already has. Every soul I've judged, every demon I've burned, he's cataloging it. He's studying me like a predator studying prey, figuring out how to survive me. And that means every mistake I make now becomes a lesson for him." The forest seemed to tighten around them, branches bending unnaturally, leaves rustling in patterns that suggested awareness. Even the night creatures moved cautiously, as if the world itself had been marked. Johnny's mind drifted to his past, the memories he usually kept buried under centuries of fire and punishment. It had started with the accident, an inferno that consumed his past, leaving only fragments of guilt and pain. His hands had become chains, his flesh had burned, and his soul had been tethered to hell itself. The first time he became the spirit of vengeance, he had realized the cost of judgment. Every action left a scar. Every punishment exacted a toll. He had walked the earth for decades, hunting sinners, fighting demons, and surviving forces beyond comprehension. He had faced beings that could bend reality, monsters that preyed on humanity in ways that made Muzan's creations look tame. And yet, standing here in this new world, with its delicate balance between humans and demons, he felt something he hadn't felt in centuries: vulnerability. He turned his gaze to Tanjiro, watching the boy's determination as he adjusted his grip on his sword. The boy's sense of justice was pure, untainted by vengeance. It was dangerous, naive, and necessary. Johnny realized then that he had never encountered a human with such resilience and clarity before. Most had either fled or crumbled beneath the weight of his presence. A sudden vibration ran through the ground. Johnny stopped, chains rattling reflexively, hellfire flaring. "He's close," he muttered. "Muzan's sending something to test us." From the shadows, a figure emerged, a demon of sleek, serpentine design, moving with a fluidity that made the ground beneath it seem to tremble. Its eyes glowed faintly with an unnatural light, reflecting a mind trained by centuries of survival and Muzan's direct influence. Tanjiro's grip tightened on his blade. "Upper moon," he whispered. Johnny didn't answer. He merely let the chains extend, wrapping around nearby trees and rocks as if anchoring himself. The hellfire around his skull flared, not wildly, but with purpose. The demon spoke, voice soft, almost melodic. "So, this is the one who burns without mercy, the spirit of judgment." Johnny's jaw tightened. "And you are." "I am his lesson," the demon said simply. The consequence he did not foresee. It lunged. Faster than any mortal eye could follow, fangs bared, claws slicing through the air. Johnny reacted instantly. Chains shot forward, striking the demon mid-leap, slamming it into a boulder. Flames engulfed its form, but the creature did not scream, did not falter. It adapted. The fire withdrew, leaving the demon intact, only slightly singed. Johnny's skull flared brighter, rage igniting in his eyes. Adaptation. Muzan is teaching you well. The demon shook off the chains effortlessly and circled him, studying him. You burn for justice. It said, you burn for sin. But in this world, justice is relative. You are naive to think you can control it here. Johnny's chains lashed outward again. Justice is not relative, it is consequence. The demon laughed, a sound that echoed unnaturally through the mountains. And yet, some sins are chosen, some are hidden, some are beyond your fire. Tanjiro stepped forward, sword glowing faintly in the darkness. We fight together, he said firmly, his voice steady despite the danger. Johnny nodded. Slightly, chains coiling around Tanjiro's blade, flames intertwined with the Nichiren steel, creating a strange, unnatural synergy. Together, he agreed. The demon lunged again, faster this time, striking at Tanjiro first. Ghost Rider reacted instantly, chains wrapping around the creature mid-attack, flinging it aside. Flames surged along the blade, and Tanjiro struck in perfect. Rhythm, but again, the demon adapted, dodging or shrugging off each attack. Johnny felt it, the strain. Each attempt to punish this creature burned more than the last. His flames flared higher, chains rattling violently, skull burning brighter as the creature tested him, stretched him. He realized then that Muzan's plan was simple: probe, adapt, overwhelm. Ghost Rider had fought monsters that could not be touched, demons that had no conscience, beings that toyed with reality itself. But Muzan was different. Muzan did not just confront. He evolved. He prepared his world to resist him. The realization struck Johnny hard. He was not merely fighting demons. He was fighting the strategy of a being who had centuries to learn, adapt, and anticipate him. Every strike, every penance stare, every chain lash was a lesson for Muzan, and every lesson learned made the demon stronger. The demon lunged again, and this time Johnny barely blocked it. Chains snapped, flames flared, and he was sent skidding across the mountainside. Pain burned in his bones, not from the impact, but from the realization that Muzan's world had found a weakness in him. Tanjiro called out, rushing to help, but even the boy's courage could not match the demon's speed and ferocity. Johnny rose slowly, chains dangling, skull burning dimly. He exhaled, flames flickering as he focused. No, he muttered, I adapt too. And from deep within the fire, memories surged. Every mistake, every lesson from centuries of judgment, every life he had touched, every consequence he had imposed. He reached deeper, calling not only on hellfire, but on the very principle of vengeance that had been forged into him. The mountain trembled, trees bent, rocks cracked. The demon hissed, surprised at the surge of raw power. Johnny's chains shot out like serpents, flames igniting around them with unmatched intensity. You learn, he growled. I adapt, and I burn what must be burned." The demon faltered for the first time, recoiling, claws slicing at nothing. Muzan's influence pulsed faintly, aware, reacting. And Johnny realized something chilling. This fight was not just about the present. Muzan had already won if he could turn Ghost Rider's judgment into his own lesson. The cost of failure here would be beyond punishment. It would be annihilation, not just of the body, but of principle. The wind howled through the mountains like the whispers of the dead. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the trees, twisting and bending as if alive. Johnny Blaze and Tanjiro advanced cautiously, the aftermath of the last encounter still lingering in their minds. The demon had vanished, but its presence lingered like a stain. Muzan's influence was no longer subtle. It pulsed, a hidden heartbeat, orchestrating the movements of creatures across the land. "Johnny," Tanjiro said, voice tight with concern. "This is different. That wasn't just a test. It was a warning." Johnny's flame burned steadily, chains coiling around his arm. "Yes, Muzan isn't just probing anymore. He's preparing. He's learning how to counter me and using his demons as extensions of his mind." A sudden ripple in the air signaled the arrival of multiple presences. Upper moons. They emerged from the forest like shadows given form, moving in perfect synchronization. Muzan's command was precise. Probe the rider, exploit weakness, overwhelm. Johnny's chains rattled as flames surged higher. Looks like he's sending his best to finish the lesson. The upper moons spread out in a semicircle, each one radiating power and malice. Their eyes, crimson and cold, focused entirely on Johnny and Tanjiro. This was no random attack. Muzan's intelligence was evident in every movement, the placement, the timing, the anticipation. "Tanjiro," Johnny said quietly, "stay close. Don't fight recklessly. These aren't ordinary demons. They've been trained by centuries of survival and cunning." The youngest moon stepped forward, voice like silk over sharpened steel. "Spirit of vengeance, you burn with fury, but this is mine to shape. You will learn that judgment is powerless here." Johnny's skull burned brighter. Hellfire swirling with raw intensity. "I don't care what world you think you own. I burn what must be burned." Chains shot outward like serpents, wrapping around two upper moons at once. Flames surged along the coils, igniting the demons in punishment. For a moment, Muzan's strategy seemed faltering. The demons screamed, staggered, and resisted instinctively, but Muzan had anticipated this. From the darkness, more upper moons attacked, coming from angles Johnny hadn't expected. Each strike was coordinated, adaptive, intelligent. He blocked, struck, burned. But every movement was calculated by someone who understood him better than he understood this world. Johnny's breath came hard. Every battle he'd fought, every demon he'd judged, had been predictable in comparison. Muzan had turned his own principles against him. He faltered, and the upper moons pressed the advantage. A sharp pang of memory struck him, unbidden. He remembered a child, a burning building, screams in the night, a choice, save the innocent or confront the guilty. Every time he chose vengeance over mercy, a piece of himself was lost. And now, standing here centuries later, the cost of those choices echoed back with brutal clarity. The upper moons sensed it. Their attacks became more precise, probing for weakness, exploiting hesitation. Johnny burned with fury, but even his fire couldn't erase the consequences of decades-long guilt, of endless judgment. He realized something critical. Muzan had not merely sent demons to kill him. Muzan had sent demons to teach him humility, to expose that vengeance alone could be manipulated, weaponized, and ultimately contained. Tanjiro noticed the struggle, even as he fought to protect himself. "Johnny, your fire is incredible, but they're learning. Each attack is making them stronger." Johnny's skull flared, chains whipping in a controlled frenzy. "I know, but I've adapted before. I can adapt again." The wind shifted. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, twisting around the upper moons, blurring their forms. Muzan's presence was no longer just a ghost in the background. It was a predator shaping the battlefield itself. Trees bent with unseen force, rocks floated momentarily before crashing down. Mountains themselves seemed to respond, groaning under the weight of an intelligence that Johnny could neither outrun nor burn away. It was here, in the midst of chaos, that Johnny began to draw on something he had not used in decades: memory as weapon. He recalled every sin he had ever judged, every life taken, every soul tormented, every consequence delivered, not as punishment, but as knowledge. A map of human and demon weaknesses, a record of fear and regret. He fed it into his fire, into his chains, letting it flare outward as more than mere flames. It became awareness, instinct and principle combined. The upper moons faltered. Muzan's strategy hit its first crack. They screamed, not in pain, but frustration. A lesson they had expected to be one-sided was slipping. Johnny's flames surged higher, chains rattling like thunder. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "I am not just vengeance, I am consequence. I am the reckoning for those who believe themselves untouchable." One by one, the upper moons stumbled, staggering under the weight of judgment they had not been prepared to endure. Muzan's influence pulsed, trying to counteract the rider's power, but it was less precise now, because Johnny had begun to anticipate the pattern, to fight not just physically, but strategically, mentally, spiritually. And in that moment, the Demon Slayer Corps realized the magnitude of the force they had allied with. Johnny Blaze was more than a weapon. He was an anomaly, something neither fully human nor fully demon, and yet capable of altering the rules of this world itself. As the last upper moon retreated temporarily, wounded and cautious, Johnny stood amidst the wreckage, chains coiled, skull burning steadily. Tanjiro approached, breathless but resolute. "We survived. But he's coming. Muzan will come himself next." Johnny nodded, flames pulsing along the chains. "I know, and when he does, we won't just fight. We'll teach him something he's never learned. Even monsters that adapt have limits." The mountains trembled faintly in the distance. Muzan's eyes, unseen but felt, followed every movement. He had recognized Johnny Blaze, not just as a threat, but as a mirror to his own cunning and cruelty. And for the first time, Muzan was intrigued, not just by victory, but by a game that had yet to be decided. Johnny closed his eyes briefly, chains rattling softly. "This world, it tests me differently. Not just strength, not just fire, not just judgment, but consequence. And Muzan, he knows exactly what to push to make me falter." Tanjiro placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we won't falter. We'll face it together." Johnny's skull burned brighter, chains clinking in agreement. "Together," he said. And far away, in the shadows of the night, Muzan smiled, red eyes glinting with calculation, curiosity, and a patience that spanned centuries. The game had begun. The night thickened, wrapping the mountains in a suffocating cloak. Shadows seemed heavier now, pressing down as if the world itself bore witness to Muzan's gaze. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl of a creature, carried the tension of an unseen predator. Johnny Blaze stood at the edge of a rocky cliff, chains coiled and glowing faintly with hellfire. His skull flared intermittently, a rhythm of thought and caution, reflecting the unrelenting calculation of the being observing him from afar. Muzan was no longer simply sending upper moons. He was orchestrating a chessboard, moving pieces from behind a veil of darkness. Every demon's action was a test, every skirmish a lesson, every failed attack a data point feeding back to him. Tanjiro, standing beside him, could feel the weight of it. It's not just the demons anymore. Muzan is watching everything we do, he said, voice taut with urgency. Every move we make, he's learning, adapting. He's preparing for you. Johnny's chains rattled softly, flames flickering. Yes, he said, low and deliberate. And that's exactly what I've been waiting for. Muzan isn't just a demon. He's a predator with patience that spans centuries. But even the most patient predators can make mistakes. Tanjiro swallowed. How do you fight someone like that? Someone who doesn't just throw his strength at you, but studies your fire, your reactions, your soul? Johnny's skull flared brighter, chains vibrating in response to the question. You fight smarter, you anticipate, you adapt, and sometimes you let them underestimate you. That's the trick with monsters who think they've seen it all. They haven't seen you. The air shifted suddenly. Muzan's presence became almost tangible. A cold, calculated pressure pressing against the rider's consciousness. Johnny winced slightly, flames burning hot, chains rattling as if testing the ground beneath him. They're coming, he said, barely audible. All of them, upper moons, his whispers in the dark. Every twisted corner of this world trained to resist me. From the shadows, a chilling wind carried a voice, soft, precise, and venomous. So, the spirit of vengeance walks my mountains. Johnny's eyes narrowed, skull burning brighter, chains rattling with unrestrained energy. I thought you'd wait for me to come to you, he muttered, tone low and almost amused. The presence deepened, swirling like smoke around the cliff's edge. Muzan was close enough that even the mountains themselves seemed to shiver. Every instinct in Johnny's body screamed that this was a being unlike any he had faced, a being who didn't merely strike, but unfolded the battlefield like a map, placing obstacles and minions where they would cause the most damage. Tanjiro glanced at him, eyes wide. This is Muzan. In person? Johnny didn't respond immediately. He let the chains tighten around his arms, hellfire flaring, as if preparing a warning. Not exactly, he said finally. He won't show himself yet, not fully. He's patient, calculating, watching to see how I react, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In that instant, memory surged within him. Painful, sharp, and relentless. The accident, the curse, the deal with Mephisto. The first time he had become the spirit of vengeance. Each sin he had judged, each life he had taken or saved, each choice he had made in fury or mercy, they all converged in his mind like molten iron. Johnny closed his eyes briefly, the hellfire dimming slightly as he drew upon decades of experience. He remembered faces of the innocent and guilty alike, faces of children hidden from fire, of criminals trembling before punishment, of lives torn apart because he had judged too quickly or too harshly. He exhaled slowly, flames reigniting brighter than before. I've walked this road for centuries, he muttered to himself, and now I walk it in a world where the rules are different, where monsters learn faster than I do, and humans fight with hearts unprepared for what comes next. Muzan, you've found a world where fire alone cannot win, but I've learned. I've always learned. A ripple in the mountains announced the arrival of Muzan's next move. Upper moons appeared, one after another, their bodies shimmering in darkness, each emanating a sense of lethal precision. Their attacks were simultaneous, coordinated and adaptive, evidence that Muzan's strategy had evolved further. Johnny's chains shot outward instantly, coiling around two upper moons mid-leap, hellfire surging along the links. For a brief moment, he held them, flames burning with judgment. But Muzan had anticipated this. Two more upper moons struck from unexpected angles, forcing Johnny to redirect his chains in split-second decisions. The hellfire flared, the skull burned brighter, but the pressure intensified. The battlefield itself seemed to resist him. Tanjiro struck alongside him, sword ablaze with sun-breathing techniques, coordinated with the rider's hellfire in a dangerous synergy. "We can't let them flank us!" Tanjiro shouted. "Focus on their formations." Johnny's voice was a low growl. "They don't have formations. They have strategy. They're a reflection of him. Every attack, every retreat, every hesitation, it's all Muzan watching, learning, testing." The first upper moon collapsed under hellfire and sword, screaming, evaporating as if the punishment had finally struck home. Another faltered but adapted instantly, claws moving with terrifying speed. A barrage of attacks forced Johnny and Tanjiro to react simultaneously, their coordination stretched to the limit. Johnny's mind raced. Muzan's intelligence wasn't limited to his minions. He was pulling at the very threads of the world, darkness bending, shadows reshaping, mountains trembling, even fire, the very essence of his being, faced resistance. He realized the stakes fully for the first time. Muzan was not only testing him, he was preparing a battlefield, shaping reality itself to ensure victory. Failure here wouldn't merely cost lives. It would cost principles, morals, and perhaps the very essence of vengeance itself. Johnny's chains rattled violently as hellfire surged, flames licking the cliff edges. "No," he growled. "I adapt. I always adapt." Tanjiro's blade struck in perfect rhythm, infused with hellfire. Together, they forced back the upper moons, creating a small clearing amid the chaos. The mountains trembled, the forest groaned, but for the first time, Muzan's calculated strategy faltered. A low, resonating laugh echoed across the mountains, chilling in its precision. Muzan's presence pulsed, testing, observing, amused. "So, the spirit of vengeance adapts," he murmured, unseen. "Interesting. Perhaps this world holds more than I anticipated. Perhaps there is a lesson even I must learn." Johnny's skull flared, chains coiling defensively. "I've learned countless lessons," he said quietly, "and every time I've survived, you will find I'm not easy to contain." From the shadows, a chilling energy pulsed. Muzan's influence had been felt, but not yet seen. The upper moons retreated slightly, regrouping under his command. Johnny's flames burned higher, chains rattling with determination, skull blazing like a warning flare. Tanjiro looked at him wide-eyed. He's real," he whispered. "We're going to face Muzan himself." Johnny's voice was firm, unwavering, "And when we do, we'll make him remember the cost of underestimating vengeance." The mountains trembled. The air thickened, and the night itself seemed to hold its breath. Muzan Kibutsuji, master of demons and architect of terror, had noticed the spirit of vengeance, and for the first time in centuries, he was intrigued, not by destruction alone, but by a force that could adapt, resist, and survive everything he had meticulously prepared. Johnny tightened his fists, flames surging, chains rattling in anticipation. "Let him come," he muttered. "Let him bring his monsters. I'll burn them. And when the darkness comes for me, I'll burn that too." The shadows twisted. Muzan's presence lingering like a heartbeat in the mountains. The game had escalated. And Ghost Rider knew. This confrontation would test everything he had ever endured. The night hung like a suffocating shroud over the mountains. Stars were blotted out by thick clouds, reflecting the darkness that had settled over the land ever since Muzan had focused his attention on the spirit of vengeance. Every tree, every rock, every shadow seemed to hold a subtle malevolence, as if the world itself had been reshaped to reflect the will of the progenitor of all demons. Johnny Blaze rode alone along a jagged cliffside, chains coiling and uncoiling around him, flames flaring intermittently like the pulse of a heart under strain. Tanjiro and the Corps followed cautiously, keeping a distance but ready to intervene. They had seen the effects of Muzan's manipulations already, the coordinated upper moon attacks, the adaptive strategies, and the way even the natural world seemed to bow, warp, and tremble under his influence. Johnny's skull glowed with a steady, eerie fire. "This is it," he muttered to himself. "The night I face Muzan, not just his minions, but him, the origin of all this evil." Tanjiro glanced at him, sword in hand, eyes wide but determined. "You're ready, aren't you?" Johnny's jaw tightened, flames surging brighter around his skull. "I've fought monsters that devoured cities, beings that could twist reality itself, but Muzan, he's different. He's patient, calculating. He doesn't just fight, he teaches, and tonight, I have to survive his lesson." The mountains trembled faintly as if echoing the words. A chilling stillness settled over the terrain, interrupted only by the faint whispers of wind and distant, unnatural sounds. Johnny stopped abruptly, chains rattling defensively. Flames surged higher along the links, illuminating the cliffside in an ominous orange glow. "He's close," Johnny said, voice low, almost a growl. "I can feel it. The air, it's different. The shadows themselves are watching." Suddenly, the darkness condensed in front of them. A figure emerged, not from the forest, nor from the shadows, but from the air itself. Muzan Kibutsuji stood on the cliff, tall, pale, and flawless, radiating a terrifying calm. His red eyes glinted with intelligence and amusement. Even without movement, his presence seemed to bend reality, sending chills racing down every spine. "Johnny Blaze," Muzan said smoothly, voice like silk over sharpened steel. "I have been curious about you, about your fire, about the way you punish, the way you burn, the way you judge, and now we meet." Johnny's skull burned hotter, chains rattling violently. "Muzan, I wondered when you'd show yourself." Muzan's lips curved slightly into a smile. "You've done well to adapt. I watched your fire consume my minions, observed how you learned, how you anticipated. And yet," he tilted his head, studying Johnny as if weighing a puzzle, "even you have limits." From the shadows behind Muzan, the upper moons appeared, moving in perfect synchronization. Their presence alone radiated lethal intent, the very air around them vibrating with power. But Johnny did not flinch. Flames surged along his chains, coiling like serpents ready to strike. "I don't have limits when it comes to punishing monsters like you," Johnny said, voice low and commanding. "I've survived the worst this world and the next have thrown at me. You're just another lesson." Muzan's eyes glinted, intrigue evident in his gaze. "Lesson, yes, perhaps, but this time the lesson is mutual. I have studied your fire, your chains, your principles, and I intend to teach you something you have never experienced: futility." The upper moons moved in, and the battle began, in earnest. Johnny's chains whipped outward, flames igniting as he struck multiple upper moons at once, hurling them back into the trees. Their screams echoed through the mountains, sharp and terrible. But Muzan had predicted this. 2 more upper moons emerged from above, attacking from angles Johnny had not anticipated. The rider blocked, chains wrapping around each demon mid-strike, flames burning with pure judgment. Yet with each movement, Muzan's presence pulsed, subtle but overwhelming. The battlefield itself seemed alive, shifting, resisting. Rocks rose and fell, shadows elongated, and even the wind carried a malevolent intent. Tanjiro leapt into the fray, coordinating attacks with the rider. Sun-breathing techniques met hellfire, slashing through upper moons, forcing them to stagger. "Stay together," he shouted. "We can push them back." Johnny's skull flared, chains coiling defensively. He could feel Muzan's presence behind every attack, every movement. "It's not enough," he growled. "Muzan is shaping this battlefield. Every strike, every dodge. It's feeding him, teaching him." A sudden sharp pressure struck his mind. A psychic force, not unlike the penance stare, but alien, cold, and calculating. Muzan's voice, though not spoken aloud, resonated in his consciousness. "You cannot burn what does not repent. You cannot judge what has no guilt." The words cut deep. Johnny faltered for a fraction of a second, enough for an upper moon to strike him across the torso, sending him sliding across the rocks. Flames flared in anger, skull burning bright as chains whipped to restrain the next wave. Tanjiro rushed to assist, blocking a lethal blow, but Muzan's plan was evident. The upper moons were not fighting independently. They were extensions of Muzan's mind, testing, probing, analyzing, learning. Every attack pushed Johnny closer to his limit, forcing him to adapt faster than ever before. Johnny inhaled sharply, letting memories surge. The accident, the curse, the endless road of vengeance. Every sin he had judged, every life he had touched, every mistake he had made. They were all tools now. Knowledge became weapon. Experience became fire. Pain became judgment. Chains flared. Hellfire burning brighter than ever, enveloping the upper moons in flames. But Muzan's presence remained, patient, observing, unyielding, interesting. Muzan murmured, tone amused. "You survive. But can you win?" Johnny's skull flared with unrestrained intensity, flames streaking like lightning across the mountainside. "I don't win for myself," he growled. "I burn for justice, for consequence, for every soul you've corrupted." Muzan tilted his head, eyes narrowing. The game had begun in earnest. The mountains quaked, shadows twisted violently. The night itself seemed alive, as if holding its breath for the coming reckoning. Johnny tightened his fists, chains rattling like thunder. Flames erupted, brighter, hotter, purer than ever before. "Come," he shouted. "Come and face the fire you cannot escape." And from the darkness, Muzan smiled. A predator finally ready to engage the spirit of vengeance, fully aware that this confrontation would test not just strength, but morality, strategy, and the very limits of existence itself. The mountains trembled violently as Muzan's presence deepened, a suffocating weight pressing down on the battlefield. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting around rocks, trees, and cliffs, as if reality itself had begun to bend under his will. The upper moons moved in perfect synchronization, an extension of Muzan's consciousness, adapting with each chain lash and flame surge from Ghost Rider. Johnny Blaze stood his ground, chains rattling violently, skull blazing like molten steel. Flames twisted around him, licking the mountainside, casting long, jagged shadows. "So this is what it feels like," he muttered, voice low and guttural. "To fight not just monsters, but the mind behind them." Tanjiro moved moved beside him, breathing hard, sword glowing faintly in the darkness. He blocked a strike from an upper moon, spinning with deadly precision. Johnny, this isn't just a fight. He's testing everything you do, your speed, your fire, even your thoughts. Johnny's chains lashed outward, flames burning fiercely along the metal. I know. I can feel it. Every move, every reaction, every mistake, it's all data for him. But I've survived worse. I adapt. I always adapt. From the shadows, Muzan's voice resonated, not spoken aloud, but pressed into their minds like a physical force. You think your fire can judge me? You think your chains can bind me? I am evolution itself. You are a candle against the storm. Johnny's skull flared brighter, hellfire pulsing violently. I don't care about evolution, he growled. I care about consequence, and I will burn what must be burned. The upper moons attacked in a coordinated wave. One lunged from the cliff above, fangs bared. Another charged from the side, claws slashing. Johnny reacted instantly, chains whipping upward to ensnare both. Flames surged along the links, igniting the demons, scorching flesh and shadow alike. Yet Muzan was always one step ahead. The upper moons adapted mid-flight, rolling and twisting to avoid the full brunt of the fire. Some disengaged entirely, leaping back into the darkness, only to return moments later with new tactics. It was a dance of death choreographed by the progenitor of all demons, and the battlefield itself seemed alive, bending to his will. Tanjiro called out, voice steady despite exhaustion. Johnny, we need to coordinate. Focus on separating them, then strike. Johnny's chains lashed with precision, intertwining with Tanjiro's sword strikes. Flames erupted along the blade, cutting through upper moons like lightning. Right, timing and focus, Johnny shouted, flames surging higher, skull burning like a beacon of wrath. The first upper moon screamed, staggering back under the combined assault. Another struck, moving unpredictably, claws slicing the air. Johnny blocked with a chain, flames bursting outward, and the impact sent rocks flying like shrapnel. He gritted his teeth. Every second counts. Every mistake is teaching him. Muzan's influence was everywhere. The shadows bent unnaturally around the combatants. Rocks levitated, and the wind carried a malevolent weight, pushing and pulling as if the very mountain was trying to suffocate them. Ghost Rider had faced impossible odds before, but this was beyond anything he had encountered. It was not merely brute strength. It was strategy, manipulation, and omnipresent awareness combined. Johnny's mind drifted for a brief moment to his past, the accident, the deal with Mephisto, the countless lives he had judged, the endless road of vengeance. Each memory surged into the flames around him, feeding the fire, giving it purpose and focus. The pain, the regret, the guilt, they were all fuel. He exhaled sharply, chains lashing outward in a wave of hellfire. I am not just fire, he roared. I am consequence, I am judgment, and you will learn it. The upper moons faltered for an instant, recoiling from the raw intensity of the flames. Muzan's presence pulsed, recalibrating, his amusement evident, interesting. The spirit of vengeance adapts. He draws power from his past, weaponizes it. Fascinating. Two more upper moons attacked from above, their speed unnerving. Johnny reacted instantly, chains wrapping around them midair, flames igniting with a blinding surge. Rocks shattered, and shadows twisted violently around him. Yet he felt the tug again, the psychic pressure of Muzan probing his mind, testing his resolve. Tanjiro shouted, coordinating their strikes. We can do this together. Focus on the weak points he leaves. Johnny's skull flared brighter. Chains whipping in synchronization with Tanjiro's sword strikes. Yes, exploit every opening. Make him regret sending them. The upper moons were powerful, but they were not independent. They were extensions of Muzan's mind, and every reaction they made, every misstep Johnny forced them into, fed Muzan more information. The writer knew this. Each burn, each strike, each moment of hesitation was teaching him how to survive. And then Johnny acted differently. Instead of striking immediately, he paused, letting one upper moon approach. Chains relaxed, flames dimmed slightly. The demon lunged, expecting punishment, but Johnny shifted at the last instant. Chains whipping to entangle, hellfire flaring with precision. The strike was brutal, surgical, and unexpected. He muttered under his breath, almost to himself, "Predictability is your weakness, and I learned that centuries ago." The upper moon fell, incapacitated, but not destroyed. Johnny's chains whipped again, striking another, forcing a retreat. Flames licked the cliffside, consuming shadows, forcing the battlefield into a narrow zone where he could control the flow. Muzan's pulse in the air changed, curious and calculating. So he fights not just with strength, but with memory, with knowledge, with anticipation. Fascinating! Johnny exhaled through the fire, chains rattling softly now, skull blazing steadily. "I've survived gods, monsters, and hell itself," he muttered. "I can survive you too." The upper moons regrouped, glaring but hesitant now. Muzan's influence was still omnipresent, but Johnny had disrupted the rhythm, forcing the progenitor of all demons to acknowledge his adaptability. Tanjiro breathed hard, stepping closer to Johnny. "You're incredible," he said quietly. "I've never seen anything like it." Johnny allowed a faint smirk, skull flaming briefly. "Neither had I, until now. But this night isn't over, not yet. And Muzan, he's going to learn the hard way." Above them, shadows twisted in anticipation. The night had not ended. The battle had only just begun. Tanjiro leapt forward, sword striking in perfect synchronization with the chains and flames, cutting through shadows, striking upper moons with lethal precision. "We can push him back," he shouted, breathless. Johnny's skull burned brighter, flames surging like a beacon. "Not push him back, challenge him, make him learn that even the unkillable can be punished." For a moment, the night fell silent. Muzan's form shimmered, observing, calculating. His amusement was evident, his patience unbroken. But even he had noticed the adaptation, the raw force of experience, and the strategic mind behind the flames. "Interesting," he thought. "This is not just a fight. This is a reckoning. Perhaps even I will learn tonight." The mountains quaked, shadows twisted, and the first true direct clash between the progenitor of all demons and the spirit of vengeance had begun in earnest. Fire, blood, and strategy collided in a deadly dance, each strike carrying centuries of experience, every move resonating with the weight of consequence and mortality. The mountains quaked violently, sending loose stones tumbling down cliffs as Muzan's presence solidified. Shadows twisted unnaturally, elongating into sharp angles that cut the darkness with invisible knives. The upper moons had been driven back, but Muzan himself now manifested fully, a figure both pale and flawless, yet radiating an aura of suffocating power. Every step he took seemed to distort reality, every glance bending shadows and wind. Johnny Blaze's skull flared. chains rattling violently. Flames surged higher than they had ever burned before, coiling around his arms, spiraling outward like living serpents. "You've finally come," he growled. "Face the fire, you cannot escape." Muzan tilted his head, crimson eyes glinting with amusement. "Fire alone. You misunderstand, spirit of vengeance. I am not merely here to survive your flames. I am here to teach you." Johnny's chains lashed outward, striking the upper moons who still lingered, flames igniting in explosive bursts. But Muzan did not flinch. Instead, he moved with terrifying speed, appearing behind Johnny in an instant, his hand slicing the air. Rocks shattered under the invisible force of the strike. The very mountainside seemed to yield to him. Tanjiro reacted instantly, his Nichiren blade cutting in tandem with the chains, flames, and steel meeting Muzan's assault. Sparks flew, rocks splintered, and the cliffside trembled under the impact. "We can't hold him alone!" Tanjiro shouted, breathless. Johnny's skull flared brighter, hellfire pulsing with his heartbeat. "We won't fight alone!" he roared. Chains whipped, lashing at Muzan's form, striking with concentrated fury. Flames erupted along the chains, scorching the air, shaking the cliffside. Muzan moved like smoke barely touched, yet his presence radiated pure, unyielding menace. Muzan's voice resonated directly in Johnny's mind, cold and precise. "You adapt, Blaze. Clever, clever. But do you understand? I am beyond consequence, beyond punishment. Your fire is irrelevant." Johnny's skull flared even hotter, hellfire twisting into shapes almost serpentine, almost alive. Irrelevant? I have survived the impossible. I have judged monsters beyond comprehension. I will adapt, and I will burn what others cannot touch. From the shadows, upper moons attempted coordinated attacks, but Johnny's chains intercepted them, hellfire igniting in perfect timing. He forced them back, spinning chains like whips of judgment, each lash precise, each strike calculated. But Muzan was not idle. His form flickered, shifting, splitting into multiple illusions, each one moving with lethal intent. Even when one form was struck by flames, another would respond, striking at angles Johnny had not anticipated. Tanjiro's sword glowed with sunlight-infused steel. "Johnny, focus on separating them," he shouted, striking in perfect rhythm with the chains. The flames surged, cutting through shadows, forcing the upper moons to stagger, but Muzan's voice echoed again, pressing into Johnny's consciousness. "Every strike strengthens me. Every misstep is my lesson. You fight, yet you feed me." Johnny's skull blazed brighter, chains lashing with violent precision. "Then I will fight smarter." He drew upon centuries of memory, the endless road of vengeance and judgment, every lesson from fire and pain. The hellfire around him twisted, coiling into concentrated, almost sentient forms. He struck again, this time targeting weaknesses Muzan had subtly left in his illusions and minions. The upper moons faltered, some retreating, some staggering. Muzan's expression shifted, intrigued, a flicker of curiosity breaking through his calm. So, Blaze adapts not only physically, but mentally. Fascinating. Very well. Reality itself began to fracture under Muzan's direct engagement. Shadows bent, cliffs cracked, winds shredded the forest. Muzan moved with terrifying fluidity, attacking not just bodies but thoughts, probing minds, exploiting hesitation. The rider faltered for the briefest instant, a moment enough for Muzan to strike at him with ghostly speed. Pain lanced through him, not physical, but the weight of centuries of guilt, consequences, and memory, all pressed simultaneously. Yet Johnny drew upon it, letting the memories surge into his fire, amplifying his chains, intensifying his skull's flames. He rose, chains whipping outward in a storm of hellfire. "I am consequence. I am judgment. I am fire. The upper moons shrieked, the flames striking them with concentrated precision. Muzan's form shimmered, slightly disrupted by the intensity, though his grin remained calm, unnerving. Interesting. He fights not just with power, but with experience, with memory, with purpose. Fascinating. Tanjiro called out, pushing forward, coordinating strikes with Johnny. Their combined force created openings, even against Muzan's overwhelming speed and illusions. Flames met shadows, steel clashed with supernatural precision, and the mountain quaked under the force of their confrontation. Johnny's voice was low, commanding, resonating with fury and judgment. I am not just fire. I am what comes from monsters who think they are untouchable. I burn what others fear. I punish what others cannot touch. And you will learn it. Muzan's crimson eyes narrowed, his expression flickering with something almost respect. So the fire endures. The chains persist. The spirit of vengeance is more than I imagined. Suddenly, Muzan struck fully, moving faster than perception, a blur of deadly precision. Chains snapped, hellfire erupted, and the mountain itself seemed to tremble from the force of the collision. Tanjiro leapt aside, blade slicing through a shadow that lunged unpredictably. The upper moons attempted another coordinated strike, but Johnny intercepted, hellfire exploding outward in controlled, devastating bursts. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Fire, shadows, steel, and speed colliding violently. Rocks shattered, trees splintered, the cliffside cracked. Muzan moved like a phantom, striking at Johnny with thought-speed precision, yet every attack was met with adaptation. Every feint countered with centuries of experience. And in that moment, the night held its breath. The first full-scale clash between the spirit of vengeance and the progenitor of all demons had reached its apex. Johnny Blaze, chains rattling violently, skull blazing like molten judgment, stood unbroken, a storm of fire and consequence, facing Muzan Kibutsuji, the ultimate predator of this world. The mountain quaked once more. Shadows twisted violently, flames flared brighter than the moon could ever shine, and Muzan, observing, analyzing, and adapting, realized something he had not felt in centuries. This is a force I cannot fully control. This is not just a monster. This is judgment itself. The stage was set. The final confrontation loomed, and the night had only begun. First light of dawn struggled to pierce the thick veil of darkness that lingered over the mountains. Charred trees, shattered rocks, and scorched earth testified to the battle that had raged through the night. The winds carried whispers of fire and shadow, remnants of a confrontation that had bent reality itself. The battle between the spirit of vengeance and Muzan Kibutsuji was over, or at least a brutal pause had settled, but its consequences were already seeping into every corner of the Demon Slayer world. Johnny Blaze stood atop a jagged cliff, chains coiling slowly around his arms, skull blazing faintly as the fire within him pulsed like a heartbeat. His body ached, not just from physical exertion, but from the weight of centuries of experience and the psychic probing he had endured from Muzan. Even as he surveyed the wreckage, he felt the lingering presence of his opponent. Muzan had survived, retreating into the shadows, but not without leaving a mark. A reminder that true evil was adaptive, patient, and relentless. Tanjiro approached cautiously, his Nichiren sword still glowing faintly from the previous night's battle. His expression was a mixture of awe and fatigue. "Johnny, we survived, but Muzan, he's still out there. He's different now, and so is this world." Johnny's chains rattled softly, flames licking the cliff edges, Yes, he said quietly. The world has changed, not just because of him, but because I was here, because I burned what needed burning, and because I left a mark he cannot erase. The wind stirred, carrying faint echoes of the upper moons who had scattered during the final moments of the confrontation. Some had been destroyed entirely, consumed by hellfire and sunlight-infused steel. Others limped back into the shadows, marked with burns and fractures, forever aware that the spirit of vengeance was more than just legend. Tanjiro's eyes scanned the horizon, lingering on the distant villages and forests now touched by the fallout. People, demons, the core, they'll all feel this. What happens now? Johnny exhaled slowly, chains rattling like distant thunder. Now, the world learns that there's a force that can punish what even they thought untouchable. Muzan may be patient, but patience doesn't make one immortal. He adapts. Yes, but I've survived adaptation before. I've survived eternity itself. A subtle tremor ran through the ground, a reminder of the chaos still simmering beneath the surface. Even in retreat, Muzan's presence lingered like a shadow over the mountains, shaping the terrain, the wildlife, and even the faint whispers of human thought. It was clear that the balance of this world had shifted. The Demon Slayer core gathered slowly, cautiously emerging from the forest below. Shinobu Kocho's eyes scanned the battlefield with her usual composure, but even she could not hide a hint of concern. The effects of Muzan's presence, they are unprecedented, she said softly. The night of the vengeance. It has left ripples through the air, the forest, and even the people. His power. It's changed. Zenitsu and Inosuke, still catching their breath, exchanged uneasy glances. That wasn't just a fight, Zenitsu muttered, voice trembling. It was like the mountain itself came alive, and him, that spirit of vengeance, he's something else entirely. Johnny's skull flared brighter, chains coiling in response to the fear and awe around him. Fear is natural, he said. But awe is recognition. You saw what I could do. You saw what happens when justice meets consequence without compromise. That is why I am here. That is why I fight. Tanjiro stepped forward, resolve settling into his features. Johnny, with Muzan gone, for now, will the world return to what it was? Johnny shook his head, slowly, skull blazing faintly. No, it can't. Not after tonight. Not after Muzan met the fire he cannot touch. The balance has shifted. The people, the demons, the core, even the mountains themselves. Everything has changed. And I've become part of it. The first true sunlight struck the mountainside, illuminating the scars of battle. Charred trees glimmered faintly, rocks reflected a dull shimmer, and shadows retreated. But the remnants of hellfire still burned faintly in the cracks, refusing to vanish completely. Johnny's chains rattled softly, flames coiling like snakes around him, as if testing the boundaries between the living world and the supernatural. He turned toward Tanjiro. You have something powerful here, he said quietly. Not just skill, not just courage, but hearts that can face what others would flee. That is why Muzan was drawn here, and why I remain. This world, it's alive in ways he hasn't measured, and it's stronger because of it. Tanjiro's eyes widened slightly. Stronger? Because of us? Because of you? Johnny nodded, skull flaring brighter. Yes, because even monsters like Muzan can't erase the consequences of their actions. Every demon you've fought, every upper moon, every choice they've made to serve him, is now weighed against something greater. And that something is the fire of judgment, tempered by experience and fueled by vengeance when justice cannot reach. A soft rustle in the trees drew their attention. Survivors, villagers, travelers, corps members emerged cautiously, eyes wide as they took in the aftermath. Some were injured, others simply in shock, but all of them bore witness to the scale of the night's events. Johnny's flames burned steadily, chains coiling as he kept a protective distance. His presence was a warning and a reassurance. Judgment had passed, and for now, the world was still standing. Shinobu Kocho stepped closer, eyes reflecting both respect and concern. Johnny Blaze, the world owes you a debt it may never fully comprehend. You fought not for glory, not for recognition, but for balance itself. And that may have changed everything. Johnny's skull flared higher, chains rattling with restrained fury. Balance isn't something anyone can appreciate immediately, and it's something felt in the consequences, in the choices people make after a storm has passed. This world, it will adapt as it always does. And perhaps one day, those who walk it will understand the price of what has been burned away. Tanjiro's expression hardened with resolve. Then we must protect it from what remains, from what might come next. Johnny's chains rattled softly, flames coiling like serpents of warning. Yes, the fight may be over for tonight, but the war is far from done. Muzan may have retreated, but he has not vanished. And every demon who remains, every shadow in this world, will remember the fire that came for them. The wind carried a faint echo of the night's chaos, a whisper of hellfire and shadow that lingered long after Muzan's retreat. The mountains remained scarred, jagged cliffs blackened from explosions of hellfire and Nichiren steel, and forests bore the deep impressions of battle. Every living thing, from the smallest bird to the most resilient tree, seemed to have felt the weight of what had occurred. Even the air itself carried a lingering tension, a reminder that the events of the night had altered the very fabric of the world. Johnny Blaze stood atop the cliff, chains coiling and uncoiling, the faint flicker of hellfire illuminating his skeletal face. He surveyed the corps, villagers, and travelers below, the ripple of exhaustion, awe and fear emanating from them like waves. "The night is over," he said quietly, his voice carrying over the stillness. "But the consequences are only beginning to settle." Tanjiro stepped closer, sword still faintly glowing, his face a mixture of determination and lingering dread. "Johnny, the Corps. We've fought demons before, but never like this. Muzan, he's changed. And so is the world. How do we even begin to rebuild?" Johnny's chains rattled softly, flames flickering like a heartbeat. "Rebuilding isn't just about restoring what was lost," he said. "It's about understanding the consequences of what remains. Every demon you faced, every battle you fought, it's part of the balance. And tonight, that balance shifted. Muzan saw something he hadn't before. And so did you." Zenitsu and Inosuke, still catching their breath, exchanged uneasy glances. Did we really just survive the impossible?" Zenitsu muttered, voice trembling. That fire, that skull, he's not human." Johnny allowed a faint smirk, skull flaring brighter for a moment. "No, I am not human. I am judgment. I am consequence. And tonight, I reminded this world and its monsters that even immortality has limits. Shinobu Kocho stepped forward, her gaze sweeping the damaged landscape. Muzan's retreat does not mean safety. His presence lingers. The upper moons, though broken, will regroup. The air is saturated with his influence, and the land itself bears the scars of his will. This world, it will never be the same. Johnny's chains rattled with quiet intensity. Good, he said. It shouldn't be. Monsters like Muzan and his minions rely on complacency. They rely on people thinking the world is safe. But this world now knows there is fire that cannot be contained, chains that cannot be broken, and judgment that cannot be ignored. Tanjiro looked out over the horizon, thoughts heavy. And the people, the villagers, the ones who saw this, who lived through it, will they ever understand what happened? Johnny's skull flared, flames twisting higher. Some will. Most won't. But they will feel it. Fear, awe, respect. These are lessons in themselves. The world learns through consequence, not explanation. They will adapt. They will survive. And some, they will become stronger because of what they witnessed. The first survivors emerged from the shadows, village elders, farmers, and travelers who had been caught in the outskirts of the battle. Their eyes were wide, reflecting terror and fascination as they took in the scorched earth, the remnants of hellfire, and the glowing chains of the rider above. Whispers spread among them. A demon of fire. A spirit of vengeance. The world has changed. Johnny let his chains rest loosely, flames dimming slightly. "Do not fear," he said, voice calm but commanding. "I am not here to harm the innocent. I am here to ensure that monsters like Muzan cannot walk this world unchecked. Tonight, judgment came, and that is all you need to know." The Corps gathered below, watching, listening. Shinobu Kocho's eyes softened slightly, though her stance remained vigilant. "You've done what none of us could. Muzan may not be gone forever, but he knows now that this world will not end so easily, and that gives us hope." Johnny's skull flared once more, chains rattling with quiet authority. "Hope is good," he said. "But hope without consequence is meaningless. Remember this, the fire that protects can also punish. The chains that bind can also judge, and the spirit of vengeance never forgets." Tanjiro's face hardened with determination. "Then we will prepare. We will train harder, fight smarter, and protect the people from what remains." "But, Johnny, will you stay?" Johnny paused, skull flickering softly, flames coiling like serpents. He looked out over the horizon, where shadows of the retreating upper moons and distant forests bore the mark of their battle. "No," he said finally. "I do not belong here permanently. My road is endless, and my duty spans worlds. But I will return, if the consequences demand it. If the fire is needed again." Zenitsu whispered, awestruck. "A force that walks between worlds, unstoppable, and yet, somehow, just..." Johnny's skull flared, flames curling like molten metal. Justice is not always kind. Judgment is not always merciful. But when fire strikes where it must, even the strongest monsters will remember the cost. The Corps nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Even Inosuke, usually brash and reckless, looked on in quiet respect, recognizing the enormity of what they had witnessed. This was not merely a battle. This was a lesson in consequence, strategy, and the unyielding force of a spirit forged by eternity itself. From the horizon, the first rays of the sun pierced the clouds, casting light across the burned and broken landscape. Shadows retreated, but the faint glow of hellfire lingered in the cracks and crevices of the cliffside, a reminder of the night's events. Johnny's chains rattled one last time, flames coiling softly, a silent warning and a promise. "The world has changed," he said, voice low and resolute. "And it will never be the same. Not after tonight. Not after the fire of vengeance walked among you." "Remember that." Tanjiro stepped forward, sword still glowing, determination etched on his face. "We will remember, and we will honor it, by protecting this world, by training, by standing against whatever comes next." Johnny nodded, skull burning with quiet intensity. "Good. That is all I ask. The fire has done its work. Now, your world must carry it forward." As he turned to leave, chains rattling softly in the morning light, a faint smile curved across his skeletal face. Admiral. The spirit of vengeance would return if needed, but for now his presence had left the world forever changed. Shadows lingered, demons plotted, but the lesson had been delivered. Judgment had walked the land, and even Muzan could not forget it. As Johnny Blaze disappeared over the horizon, riding his flaming motorcycle into the distant clouds, a profound silence settled across the mountains. The wind no longer carried the screams of battle or the weight of Muzan's oppressive presence. Instead, it whispered through scorched trees and fractured cliffs, carrying the faint scent of smoke and the lingering warmth of hellfire. The world had survived, but it had been irrevocably altered. Tanjiro stood at the edge of the battlefield, Nichiren sword in hand, observing the scattered remnants of what had been an apocalyptic night. He noticed the upper moons, defeated and retreating into distant shadows, nursing injuries that would remind them of this confrontation. Forever. Muzan's retreat had left a scar not only on the land, but on the consciousness of every demon, still bound to his will. Even the progenitor of all demons had been forced to acknowledge a force beyond his comprehension. Shinobu Kocho stepped beside Tanjiro, her composure intact, but her gaze heavy with thought. He is gone, for now, but this world will remember him. The fire he carried, the chains he wielded, they are not just weapons. They are symbols of something larger, an unyielding consequence that even Muzan could not evade. Tanjiro nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling in. "I can feel it. The people, the demons, the mountains themselves, they've all been changed. We fought alongside him, but in some ways, we were merely witnesses to something beyond our understanding." Tsu shivered slightly, his usual nervous energy tempered by awe. "A force like that. I've never seen anything like it. Fire that burns not just the body, but the soul. Chains that carry judgment across worlds. It's unbelievable." Inosuke slammed a fist against a nearby rock, sending a shower of shards into the air. "I don't care if it's unbelievable. That thing, that rider, he saved this world, and I'm gonna remember that fight for the rest of my life." Johnny Blaze's presence, though now distant, had left a tangible mark. Survivors in the villages below began to speak in hushed tones about the fiery skeleton that had descended from the night, punishing monsters with a fire no one could resist. Stories spread quickly, of upper moons scorched beyond repair, of shadows retreating in terror, and of a being who embodied justice so absolute it could not be ignored. Even the Demon Slayer Corps felt the impact. The battle had forced them to confront the limits of their abilities, the depth of Muzan's power, and the necessity of adaptation. Tanjiro's breathing techniques, Inosuke's raw strength, and Zenitsu's lightning speed had all been tested in ways they had never imagined. But alongside Johnny Blaze, they had seen how experience, strategy, and unflinching judgment could shape the tide of battle, even against seemingly invincible opponents. Shinobu Kocho's voice cut through the quiet. This world, our responsibilities, they are greater than ever. Muzan may have retreated, but his influence lingers. Every demon who survived tonight carries a warning. Every village touched by his shadow has learned fear, and every one of us must prepare for the day he strikes again. Tanjiro looked down at the scorched earth, determination etching his face. Then we will prepare. We will train harder, fight smarter, and protect this world with every ounce of strength we have. The fire Johnny brought, it isn't just a weapon. It's a reminder of what's possible when judgment and action meet. The first few villagers cautiously approached, their expressions a mixture of gratitude, fear, and disbelief. They spoke of the terrifying figures, the fire, the chains, and the way the night had seemed to twist reality itself. Even those untouched physically had felt the weight of the confrontation in the trembling air and the oppressive shadows. Johnny Blaze's words, though now only remembered in echoes, carried with them a lesson. Justice is not passive. Consequence cannot be ignored. Even immortality and power are subject to the weight of judgment. Those who survived the night would carry this lesson in their hearts, shaping the decisions of the world moving forward. Tanjiro turned to Shinobu, voice quiet but resolute. The world has changed, but if we honor what happened tonight, if we adapt and learn, maybe we can protect it in ways we never thought possible. Shinobu nodded. Yes, and we must. The spirit of vengeance may have left, but his fire has ignited something in this world. We are responsible for ensuring it doesn't fade. In the days that followed, the mountains slowly began to heal, though the scars of battle remained visible. The forests grew cautiously, trees regrowing where they could, the air clearing of the lingering smoke. But the legend of the night persisted, spreading across towns, villages, and cities. Stories of Ghost Rider, the spirit of vengeance, and the fire that had judged Muzan reached far and wide. Even demons, hidden in the shadows, began to recognize the new balance. The upper moons, weakened and fearful, carried knowledge of a power they could neither predict nor resist. Muzan, too, was forced into new calculations, aware now that the world held forces beyond his control, forces that could shape consequences in ways he had never encountered. The Demon Slayer Corps trained harder, strategized more effectively, and began to recognize the subtle ways in which judgment could be a weapon beyond mere strength. Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu grew not only in skill, but in awareness. Their understanding of the stakes deeper than ever before. And while Johnny Blaze would not remain, his presence lingered, an eternal reminder of the consequences of unchecked evil and the fire of judgment that could strike across worlds. By the time the sun fully rose over the mountains, illuminating the rebuilt villages and forests, the world had been altered. Shadows seemed a little less oppressive. The air carried a subtle warmth, a memory of the hellfire that had scorched the night. And while Muzan remained a threat, the knowledge of the spirit of vengeance's existence provided both warning and hope. Johnny Blaze had come and gone, but his fire remained. burning quietly in the memories of those who had seen it, in the scars on the land, and in the hearts of those who would continue the fight. The days that followed were quiet, but heavy with reflection. The sun rose and set over a world that had been irrevocably altered. Villagers began to rebuild their homes. Forests slowly recovered from the scars of hellfire, and the mountains settled into a fragile calm. Yet underneath the surface, the world was not as it had been. Every stone, every tree, every breath of wind carried the echo of the battle that had raged across the night, leaving a permanent reminder that a force beyond imagination had touched their lives. Tanjiro walked along the ridgeline where the final clash had taken place, his Nichirin sword slung over his shoulder. The smell of charred earth and lingering flame reminded him that even when monsters retreated, their influence remained. "We fought alongside something greater than anything we've faced," he muttered to himself. "And yet we survived, we adapted, we learned." Shinobu Kocho joined him, her usual calm composure tempered by solemn respect. Johnny Blaze was no ordinary fighter, she said quietly. The fire he carried was more than a weapon. It was judgment incarnate. The way he fought, the way he adapted. It's a lesson the Corps must never forget, and it is one we will carry forward. Zenitsu, still recovering from the shock, muttered under his breath, "I thought I knew fear. I thought I knew monsters. But that fire, that skull, it wasn't fear. It was something else, something eternal." Inosuke, usually brash and reckless, stood silently, hands resting on his swords. Even he seemed aware that the world had shifted, that the night's events had left a mark on everyone who had witnessed them. "That rider," he said quietly, "he's not just a fighter. He's a force. And if Muzan ever comes back, we'll need to remember him." The Corps gathered in the aftermath, discussing strategy, sharing observations, and tending to those injured. Yet all conversations inevitably returned to the figure of Ghost Rider, the flaming skeleton who had walked among them for a night and shown the true meaning of consequence. His presence had illuminated not just the limitations of their enemies, but the potential within themselves. Tanjiro looked down at the valley below, where villagers were cautiously beginning to return to normal life. "They'll never forget," he said. "Even if they don't fully understand, even if the stories grow taller and wilder, they'll remember the fire that walked the night and the lesson it brought." Shinobu nodded, her expression unreadable but resolute. Memory is power, and in remembering, people prepare. That is how change begins. That is how the world adapts. Meanwhile, in the shadows, surviving upper moons and lesser demons huddled together, nursing injuries and reconsidering their positions. They had witnessed a force that could not be controlled, could not be predicted, and could not be ignored. Whispers of the flaming skull spread among them, filling even the most hardened demons with a measure of fear they had never known. Muzan's retreat had left a vacuum of power, but more importantly, it had left a precedent. Even the most powerful could be judged. Even the most cunning could be countered. Johnny Blaze, riding through the distant horizon, felt the pulse of the world beneath him. He could sense the echoes of his fire, the subtle shifts in air and thought left behind by his presence. He did not linger. His path was eternal. His mission never complete. But he knew that the world had been touched irrevocably. The spirit of vengeance had walked among mortals and demons alike, and the consequences of that night would ripple across generations. As he vanished into the clouds, he allowed himself a brief thought of the Demon Slayer Corps. Tanjiro, Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Shinobu all had shown remarkable courage, adaptability, and resilience. They had survived what no ordinary human could, and in doing so, they had proven that the fire of justice was not his alone. It could be mirrored, reflected, and carried forward by those willing to act with honor and resolve. Back in the mountains, Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu trained tirelessly, now with a new perspective. Each swing of their swords, each breath control, each technique was infused with the lessons of the night. Strategy, anticipation, and the understanding that every action has a consequence beyond its immediate effect. They were no longer simply demon slayers. They were guardians of a world that had seen fire walk the night and survived. Shinobu Kocho worked alongside them, ensuring that their preparation extended beyond skill. She instilled discipline, focus, and the importance of understanding the unseen consequences of battle. Every moment of training was colored by the memory of Ghost Rider, every strategy informed by his presence. The Corps, as a whole, had been fundamentally altered, not just in strength, but in perspective. Even Muzan, isolated in his shadows, was forced to reconsider his approach. The existence of a force like Ghost Rider, a judgment that transcended mere strength, was a variable he could not predict, a threat that would haunt him in every plan, every movement, every thought. For the first time in centuries, Muzan faced the reality that power alone was not enough. There were forces in the world, incorporeal yet absolute, that could punish even him. And so the world began to change. Villages rebuilt, forests regrew, and the mountains slowly healed. But the memory of fire remained in every corner. Children whispered tales of the flaming skeleton. Elders warned of the spirit of vengeance, and the Corps worked with renewed dedication to prepare for the battles to come. Ghost Rider's visit had left the world both scarred and enlightened. Johnny Blaze's chains rattled softly. A distant echo carried on the wind. A reminder that judgment never truly left, that vengeance would always return when needed, and that fire, unforgiving, eternal, and just, could cross even worlds to restore balance. As the sun set over the mountains, Tanjiro stood atop a ridge, sword in hand, gazing at the horizon where the flaming figure had vanished. "The world is different now," he said softly, "and we must rise to meet it." Shinobu Kocho placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yes, the fire may be gone for now, but its lessons endure, and so must we." In the distance, the faint glow of hellfire vanished into the clouds, leaving behind a world forever changed. A world that had witnessed judgment incarnate. A world that had survived fire and shadow. A world that would never forget the night the spirit of vengeance walked among them. And somewhere beyond the mountains, on endless roads lit by flames that could not be extinguished, Johnny Blaze rode on. Eternal, unstoppable, and unyielding. A force that transcended worlds. A reminder that judgment waits for no one, and that the fire of vengeance burns forever.